Hello everyone and welcome to a really awesome game from round 10 of the FTX Crypto Cup. It was the last round that was played yesterday, last game, and it's Fabiano Caruana versus Anish Giri. Giri was leading the tournament basically for the entire day 1 and day 2, and Fabi is half a point behind and he's trying to catch up. And this is a really great game. It really shows how being a top elite player and knowing everything is very helpful, but also how how simple chess is when you actually understand it. And here, basically, let's just see what happens, and sure, you guys are gonna enjoy this one. So Fabi has the white pieces, and he opens with e4. And basically what this game will be about is how to win a game by dominating one of your opponent's pieces. And, this will be utter and complete dominance. So here we have e5, knight to f3, knight to e6, and bishop to b5. So just a normal Ruy Lopez here. We have a6, Morphy's defense, bishop a4, knight to f6. So nothing out of the ordinary for the first like 20 moves. Castles b5, just usual Ruy Lopez moves, bishop to c5. We have c3, preparing to strike in the center. We have d6 and d4. And this has been played many times by many strong grandmasters. Anish also had a game against Levon Aronian in the Opera Euro Rapid, where he had the white pieces. That game ended in a draw. They played with both white and black. So here we have bishop back to b6, bishop to e3, and then now we have castles here. And now Giri against Levon went knight b to d2 here, but Fabi goes h3. So still not a new move. We have rook to e8, and then now knight b to d2. And here there are some games where bishop to b7 was played. Also knight to a5 is a known move, just making room for that c5 pawn. But here we have h6 by Anish, and already as of move 11 we have a completely new game. So let's see how Fabi plays this. We have rook to e1. Continuing development. Now the rook will also help out with the defense here. We have e captures, c captures, and just knight to b4. Now making room for this c pawn, but also eyeing that d3 squared. If you're able to get your knight there, you're gonna get a nice attack against the rook and the b2 pawn here. But Fabi doesn't care. Fabi just plays d5, offers a trade of dark square bishops, and even allows this knight to d3, and he allows Anish to snatch a pawn here. So here we have knight to d3 right away. It is the best move. Rook to e2, saving the rook, and now Anish doesn't go for the pawn. If you go for the pawn, you're going to have to give it back. For example, queen c2, and now wherever you go, we're going to capture this knight and the pawn as well. For example, captures, captures, and captures. And this is fine for black, but Anish decides to keep the tension. He plays knight to h5. He wants to bring the other knight to f4 and further harass this rook, maybe even force Fabi to give up the dark square bishop. So Fabi grabs Giri's dark square bishop, so he doesn't have to give it up for a knight, and leave this monster bishop here on this diagonal. Bishop captures, we have c captures, and now rook to e3. Anticipating knight to f4, so now if knight to f4, we could play something like queen b1, attack this knight here, maybe kick it away, and play it from there. And while this isn't bad, Anish decides to grab the pawn now. So knight captures on b2, queen to c2 by Fabi, and now knight to c4. So like I said, you're going to have to give the pawn back. Captures, captures, and captures, and then now b5. And while this is very nice, Fabi just plays queen to d4, and now we have knight to f4. And now just rook a to e1. And if you look at the position now, this is basically what this game is about. Look at this. Look at the Giri's dark square bishop, or rather light square bishop. The dark light square bishop. I meant to say that. Doesn't really have anywhere to go. This is covered. This is covered. This is covered. And okay, this is possible, but the bishop will not be doing anything there for a very long time. So here we have knight to g6. He's trying to prevent e5. He wants to blockade the position with knight to e5, but of course Fabi just executes e5 on the spot. So the captures, we have a capture fest here on e5, captures, captures, and captures, captures, and captures. And here, okay, the position simplified a little bit, but the idea remains. The bishop still has no squares. The rook now covers f5, so you don't have this. This is covered, this is covered, this is covered. And you don't really have a square for this light square bishop. And that's what Fabi will now use to his advantage. The knight will completely now dominate this light square bishop. So here, well, you could play something like bishop to b7 and claim, okay, you're going to push the pawn at some point. Pushing the pawn is just terrible for black. For example, queen to d7, you're going to block the pawn, knight comes here, then the knight comes here, or rather, even better, knight can come here, so you don't even allow black to exchange it. Then you can go knight to c5, and that's just terrible for black. So instead, after rook captures on e5, we have bishop to d7. You have to play the bishop somewhere, but now knight to b3. We're still getting to that c5 square. Queen to f6, and now knight to c5. Attacking the bishop here, we have rook to d8, Anish defends it, and now queen to e4. Again, with a terrible threat of just picking up the bishop. If Anish does something weird here, we're just gonna pick up the bishop and deliver checkmate as the queen covers the h7 square. So instead, after queen e4, we have g6, and now, okay, now you gave the king some breathing room, but you also weakened the position a little bit. Now, Fabi could also look into ideas like maybe queen d4 with ideas of just check, and, the queen on f6 is now undefended, but he goes for something else. He plays g4. Further limits the movement of this light square bishop, king to h7, and now rook to e7, now threatening to win the bishop. So bishop to c8, and now rook to c7. So what do you play here? Well, you constantly have to worry about moves like knight to e6 coming because the f-pawn is pinned. So here, Giri unpins, and now king to g2. Fabi starts improving the position of his king. We have h5, and now queen to f3. Now offering a queen trade, and Fabi is now very happy to go into this endgame because the light square bishop is just non-existent here. And you will never be able to capture this pawn because now the bishop is actually hanging on c8 if the rook moves. So here, king g7, and now knight to e4. Now Fabi forces a queen trade. We have queen captures, and now king captures. We have h captures on g4, h captures, and again, this is not possible because the bishop would just hang. So bishop to d7, but now again knight to c5, again harassing this bishop, and here you really don't have a move. If you play something like bishop back to c8, just d6, and we're gonna win this bishop now. Next move, we're gonna play d7, and that's it, game over. And of course, if you capture, then we're just gonna capture your bishop here. So instead, after this knight to c5 move, Anish says, all right, there are basically no moves I can play here with my bishop. Playing something like bishop here runs into knight to e6 check. The f-pawn is pinned. We're going to lose the rook here. So I might as well grab 2 pawns for this bishop. So finally, bishop captures on g4. And that's it. That's what this bishop accomplished this game. For the entire game, it was just, hiding on c8, on d7, on c8, on d7. And now, for the lack of a better move, you have to give it up for 2 pawns, which is not bad. So here we have king captures, and now rook captures on d5. And now Anish has 2 pawns for the piece, but... if maybe his position was a bit more active, maybe you could use that better. But here it's going to be very hard with f4 by Fabi. And now king to h6. You can't really play something like rook to d2, go after this, because you might run into a mating net. For example, knight e6 check. Now if you go king to f6, knight to g5. And now, for example, this will be checkmate. So you'd have to go back. Then we pick up pawns with check. Then, for example, this, we go after these pawns. And then doesn't really matter. For example, captures with check. We're going to move the rook, and we're going to push this pawn. And it's going to be a very, very easy victory for Fabi. So instead, after f4, we have king to h6, saying that, okay, you cannot really capture this because your knight would hang, but now king f3. We have f5 by Giri, king to e3, rook to d6 now, defending the a6 pawn, and now rook to a7 with a double attack here. We have rook to c6. Now, if rook captures, then we can capture the knight, and if the knight captures, then you can just play rook to c3 with check, and then you will be able to... for example, rook to c3 check, king to d4, rook to a3, and now, well, now there's this. So not really much to look at. And if you play something like, well, you could try something like king to c5. We're going to play rook captures on a2. And now when you start pushing these pawns, you will have excellent drawing chances. So instead, after rook to c6, we have just king to d4 by Fabi. And now rook to d6 with check. We have king to e5. And it was in this position that Anish Giri resigned the game, as now it is, it's really unplayable. Pawns will start falling, and there's just not much you can do here. For example, if you go something like this, then even knight to e6 is possible, and you have to be very careful here, because, for example, knight g5 is coming, and then you might have real problems here. But it's you don't even have to go for checkmate. You could just start collecting pawns, and the Giri doesn't really have any active moves to play here. So really a wild one, and really shows you how simple elite chess is, and how you can take down such a strong opponent like Anish Giri by seemingly doing not all that much, basically just dominating the light square bishop for the entire game. As here after b5, like we said, all of these squares were taken, and the light square bishop couldn't find a single square for the rest of the game. In the end, you had to sacrifice it for 2 pieces. So also a very interesting concept. Maybe you can use it in some of your own games. So hope you got something out of this one. I thought it was a very nice game to show. And also, so we don't forget, these are the standings after the first 10 rounds. Giri was leading the tournament, but now after he was beaten by Fabi takes the lead, or rather Fabiano Caruana, Teimur Rajabov, and Hikaru Nakamura share first place with 6.5 points. Then Anish and Wesley with 6, Sviller, Magnus, and Maxim Vachier-Lagrave with 5.5. Those are the top 8, and then Ding also with 5.5 in 9th, Mamedyarov in 10th with 4.5, Ian Nepomniachtchi and Levon Aronian on 12th, Firuzja Dubov and Grishchuk, Firuzja and Dubov with 4, then Grishchuk with 3, and Alan Pichot with 1.5 points. So he did grab some of the points. So we'll see one more day of Rapid, and then we'll see who qualifies for the main event. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Always try to dominate your opponent's pieces if you can. I would like to thank Mr. Hoodie Guy, Boris Redenchik, Davana Shah, and Aman Patel, Barry McMurdoch, and Pratamesh Mahajan for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing with this wonderful tournament, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.